The 2025 NFL Draft is over, and the outlook for the Commanders couldn't be more controversial. What's happening in Washington might completely change the course of the franchise. Are they building a contender or making unforgivable mistakes? We have exclusive information about a late pick that could revolutionize the offense, but also a monumental error that directly benefited a divisional rival. And most alarming, the team's most critical position was completely ignored in the draft. Could this decision sink fans' hopes for the 2025 season? Stay tuned until the end, because this is something every true Commanders fan needs to know right now. While everyone is talking about the early picks, Adam Peters might have struck gold in the last round of the draft. Who would have thought? At pick 245, almost at the end of the event, the Commanders selected Jaquarii Crosby-Merritt, an explosive running back from Arizona who went completely unnoticed by many teams. And why was no one talking about him? I'll tell you this. Crosby-Merritt played only one game in 2024 before the NCAA barred him from continuing due to eligibility issues. Just one game. But it was enough for Peters to see something special in him. Let's dive into this. Before his NCAA issues, Crosby-Merritt was projected as a day 2 prospect. His blend of speed, power, and vision set him apart in Arizona. In the 2023 season, he racked up more than 1,200 rushing yards and 13 touchdowns, showcasing an impressive average of 5.7 yards per carry. His ability to find gaps and exploit defenses with his first cut made him a constant threat. What makes this pick even more intriguing is the due diligence Peters conducted. According to sources close to the team, the GM spent weeks investigating the details of Crosby-Merritt's eligibility situation, interviewing his college coaches, and assessing his character. This wasn't a random selection. It was a calculated decision based on thorough evaluation. Louis Riddick from ESPN mentioned during the draft coverage that Washington might have a real steal on their hands. And I believe he's entirely correct. This running back has a one-cut running style that was exactly what was missing in the Commanders' ground attack in 2024. The stats back this claim. The Commanders finished 22nd in rushing yards last season, averaging just 3.9 yards per carry. Brian Robinson Jr. showed flashes but failed to maintain consistency, while Chris Rodriguez Jr. and Austin Eckler didn't bring the spark needed to elevate the running game. Crosby-Merritt could be that catalyst to transform Washington's backfield. His playing style is reminiscent of Aaron Jones during his prime years with the Packers. Decisive in finding the gap, explosive in accelerating through it, and with the endurance to maintain a high level throughout the game. He's also shown receiving skills, crucial in the offensive scheme implemented by Cliff Kingsbury. Can a 7th-round pick really make a difference? I'll ask you this. Do you remember Ahmad Bradshaw or Marks Colston? These players were late-round selections who transformed their teams. And Crosby-Merritt has the hunger and talent to follow that path. Consider also Shannon Sharp, 7th round, Julian Edelman, 7th round, or even the legendary B.O. Jackson, 7th round. The NFL is filled with gems found in the later rounds. In fact, over the last 5 years, we've seen running backs like Isaiah Pacheco and Elijah Mitchell, both late-round selections, become significant contributors to their teams. What's most interesting is that he has a real shot at getting immediate playing time. The current running backs on the team should be looking over their shoulders, because this rookie comes in with something to prove. His backfield teammates didn't impress last year, and now they have serious competition. Kingsbury's offensive scheme has traditionally thrived with a dynamic back who can attack the edges and also function in the passing game. During his time in Arizona, we saw how he used Chase Edmonds and James Conner in complementary roles. Crosby-Merritt could perfectly fit that system, offering a dimension that other backs on the roster simply lack. And what about his preparation for the professional level? Crosby-Merritt has been training with former All-Pro running back DeMarco Murray, who praised his work ethic and determination. Murray recently stated, "This kid has the biggest chip on his shoulder I've ever seen. He's determined to prove." that all the teams that passed on him made a huge mistake. The big question is whether he can turn this opportunity into real production. I believe Crosby Merritt will use what happened with the Wildcats as motivation to prove he deserves a spot in the NFL. The Commanders are giving him that chance, and we should all keep an eye on his progress over the summer, according to Rookie. Minicamp reports. Crosby Merritt has already impressed coaches with his explosiveness and ability to absorb the playbook. If he continues this way during OTAs and training camp, I wouldn't be surprised to see him climbing the rotation to secure a significant role by week 1. Have you ever seen a team give talent to a direct rival? Well, that is exactly what the Commanders did in this draft. With only 5 picks available, each selection was crucial. And although 4 of them make sense, there is one that leaves me completely baffled. In the 6th round, with the 205th pick, Peters chose UCLA linebacker Kane Medrano. There's nothing wrong with the player himself. In fact, on many draft boards, he was even projected for the 4th round. The problem is what they passed up. First, let's analyze Medrano. He's a versatile athlete who began his college career as a receiver before switching to defense. Standing 6'2" and weighing 235 pounds, he has a physical build similar to Jeremy Chin, suggesting that the Commanders could use him in a hybrid safety linebacker role. His speed and coverage are impressive for someone of his size, registering 68 tackles, 7 for loss, and 2 interceptions in his final season with the Bruins. But here's the dilemma. Did they really need another defensive hybrid when they already have Tyler Owens on the roster and just signed Frankie Louvu, who can play similar roles? And what did they miss out on? I'll tell you this. Just 4 picks later, Howie Roseman and the Eagles selected Antwan Powell-Rillen, one of the best pass rushers available. And the worst part is that the Commanders have multiple meetings with him before the draft. The irony is even more painful when you examine Powell-Rillen's numbers at Virginia Tech. This young man wasn't an unknown or underrated prospect. He was a defensive production machine that Washington simply decided to ignore, allowing him to fall into the hands of a direct rival that already boasts one of the league's most formidable defensive fronts. This was not the only pass rusher they ignored. In the 2nd round, with Ashton Gillott from Louisville available, who was also a top 30 visit with the team, Peters went for cornerback Trey Amos. The Chiefs immediately capitalized and took Gillott. Here's another level of concern. The Chiefs see Gillott as the perfect complement to George Karlaftis, potentially creating another dominant pass-rushing duo. Meanwhile, the Commanders are sticking with an edge rusher rotation that generated just 34 sacks last season, placing them 21st in the league. The selection of Amos makes sense from a certain perspective. He measures 6 foot. 1 and weighs 190 pounds, with the speed and fluidity to become a lockdown cornerback. Washington needed bigger corners for Dan Quinn's system, and Amos fits that mold. But is corner a more urgent need than pass rush? The numbers say it isn't. Now, I'll ask you, why ignore such an obvious need? Powell-Rillen recorded 25.5 sacks in his last 2 college seasons, the most in all of FBS. Just in 2024, he had 16 sacks, 3 fumble recoveries, 3 forced fumbles, and 19 tackles for loss. All this in just 12 games. These numbers are comparable to what Nick Bosa produced at Ohio State before becoming a 1st-round pick. And while Powell-Rillen doesn't have Bosa's pedigree, his production speaks for itself. He's the kind of player who can immediately contribute as a pass rush specialist, exactly what the Commanders need. Criticisms of Powell-Rillen focus on his size. At 6'2" and 243 pounds, he doesn't have the ideal structure for an NFL edge rusher. His arms are a bit short by league standards. But these same defects didn't prevent players like Hassan Reddick or Yannick Ngakoue from becoming elite quarterbacks hunters. And while the Commanders ignored him, the Eagles were reinforcing precisely the position they lost when Josh Sweat left in free agency. It's almost incomprehensible that Peters did so little to improve his pass rush this offseason. Howie Roseman's track record of building dominant defensive lines is well known. From Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham to Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick, the Eagles continue to find and develop talents on the defensive line. Powell Rillen seems to be next in that tradition, and the Commanders had the chance to prevent it. Does he have such confidence in the development of Jacob Martin or Javonte Jean-Baptiste? Martin has been primarily a rotational player in his career, never exceeding 4 sacks in the season. Jean-Baptiste showed flashes as a rookie, but expecting him to become a dominant pass rusher overnight seems overly optimistic. Or perhaps Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. have a secret plan to generate pressure in other ways? Quinn has historically preferred rush packages with multiple fronts and creative blitzes. It's possible he plans to use Frankie Louvu, who recorded 5.5 sacks in 2023 with the Panthers, as a versatile weapon from various positions. The addition of Medrano could be part of this broader plan. If Quinn intends to implement more schemes with hybrid safety linebackers who can blitz from different angles, then the selection starts to make more sense. But even so, wouldn't it have been wise to secure at least one pure edge rusher at some point in the draft? Meanwhile, Philadelphia continues doing what it always does, accumulating big, fast players on their defensive line. The same strategy that led them to the Super Bowl last year. The Eagles now have a rotational group of pass rushers that includes Nolan Smith Jr., Bryce Huff, Josh Hutch, and now Powell Rillen. This depth allows them to keep their players fresh throughout the game, especially in crucial third down situations. The Commanders, on the other hand, don't have that luxury. The biggest surprise of the draft wasn't what the Commanders did, but what they didn't do. Of all the needs the team had entering the draft, none was more obvious than bolstering the pass rusher position. Yet Adam Peters decided to completely ignore this area. How is this possible? I'll tell you this. This draft was deep in defensive talents. There were top-tier prospects and interesting projects in later rounds. But Peters preferred to focus on other positions, following his philosophy of selecting the best player available, regardless of need. Let's explore the options they passed up. In addition to Powell Rillen and Jalot, talents like Brennan Jackson from Washington State, Javon Solomon from Troy, and Austin Booker from Kansas were available. Any of them would have provided at least depth at a critically depleted position. Even after the draft, the Commanders didn't prioritize signing pass rushers as undrafted free agents. They missed opportunities with players like Grayson Murphy from UCLA or Nelson Cisa from Houston, who signed with other teams and could have competed for playing time in Washington. The problem is evident when we compare Washington's group of edge rushers with the rest of the division. The Cowboys have Micah Parsons, the Eagles just bolstered themselves, and the Giants have Brian Burns. Meanwhile, the Commanders rely on Dorrance Armstrong Jr., Clelin Ferrell, and Dietrich Wise Jr., none of whom strike fear into opposing offensive lines. Let's analyze this disparity in detail. Micah Parsons has accumulated 40.5 sacks in his first 3 years in the league. Brian Burns has 46 sacks in 5 seasons. In comparison, Armstrong Jr., Ferrell, and Wise Jr. combined for just 11.5 sacks last season. Armstrong Jr. comes from Dallas, where he never exceeded 5 sacks in a season, despite playing alongside Parsons, who constantly drew double teams. Ferrell, a 2019 first-round pick, has been widely regarded as a bust, never recording more than 4.5 sacks in the season. Wise Jr. is primarily a run specialist who doesn't provide consistent pressure on the quarterback. Now, I'll ask you, is this enough to compete in such a tough division? The answer seems obvious. It's a risky bet that could become the team's Achilles heel in 2020-5. The stats don't lie. Teams that made the playoffs in 2024 averaged 45 sacks during the regular season. The Commanders, with 34, were well below that mark. And considering they haven't significantly improved their pass rush, it's hard to see how they plan to close that gap. Moreover, there's a critical factor to consider: Jaden Daniels. With a rookie quarterback under center, the defense needs to be exceptionally solid to relieve pressure on him. If the Commanders can't stop rival quarterbacks, Daniels might find himself constantly in situations where he must win offensive. Shootouts, a recipe for disaster for a developing QB. Peters hasn't even added another pass rusher among the undrafted free agents, though that might change. Everything indicates he has supreme confidence in the current options. Or perhaps he has something else in mind with the $26.18 million available in salary cap space. This amount of cap space is significant. It's enough to acquire an elite pass rusher via trade or sign a high-profile free agent who might become available after June 1st. When teams can designate players as post-June 1st cuts to spread the impact on cap space, could he be considering a dramatic move for someone like Trey Hendrickson? The Bengals spent their first-round pick on Shemar Stewart, which could make Hendrickson available. Hendrickson recorded 17.5 sacks last season and would be an immediate and dramatic upgrade. Other options might include Zadarius Smith, who still hasn't found a team, or even considering a trade for someone like Chase Young, who knows Washington well and could be available if San Francisco decides not to extend his contract. I believe Peters must be preparing some additional move because relying solely on the current group of pass rushers would be a monumental mistake. Historical evidence supports this concern. Looking back over the last decade, no team has won the Super Bowl without at least one pass rusher who recorded 8 or more sacks that season. The Chiefs had Chris Jones, the Rams had Aaron Donald, and the Buccaneers had Shaquille Barrett. A dominant pass rush isn't a luxury. It's a necessity for success in modern NFL. The fan base trusts Peters, and rightly so. He has shown that he knows how to build a winning roster. During his time in San Francisco, he was instrumental in building a fearsome defensive line that included Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, and DeForest Buckner. His eye for talent is undeniable. Perhaps he sees something in the current edge rushers that external analysts don't. Maybe he believes Dan Quinn, known for maximizing defensive talent, can elevate these players' performance. Or possibly he is planning to implement a defensive scheme that doesn't rely so heavily on pressure generated by traditional edge rushers, but expectations are higher in his second year at the helm, and the margins for error are smaller. This decision to stick with the current group of edge rushers represents a considerable risk, and it will be something to definitely watch when preparations for the new season intensify. If the Commanders are to seriously compete in the NFC East, where they will face quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, and Daniel Jones behind generally solid offensive lines, they need to find ways to generate consistent pressure. Otherwise, even the best secondary coverages will eventually break down. What do you think about the selection of Jacory Krosky-Merritt? Do you believe he can be the steal of the draft, or is he just another 7th-round pick who will pass without leaving a mark? And about allowing Powell Rillen to fall into the Eagles. Hands, was it an unforgivable mistake, or do you trust that Peters knows what he's doing? Finally, should the Commanders desperately seek a pass rusher in free agency or through a trade? Or do you think the current group can surprise us? This is a critical moment for the franchise, and I need to know what you all think. Leave your comments below, and if you like this analysis, don't forget to subscribe for more exclusive content about the Commanders. If you made it this far, you're a true fan and deserve to stay informed with the best analysis. And remember, hail to the Redskins!